Hello, listeners. It's Gunter here with some exciting news. We're on the lookout for sponsors to join us on our incredible journey with Inspired Change with Gunter. If your organisation cares deeply about meaningful conversations around masculinity, self development, and mental health, we'd love to partner with you. Our podcast has a wonderful, dedicated audience committed to personal growth and positive social change. By sponsoring Inspired Change with Gunter, your brand will connect with listeners who truly value thoughtful discussion and support initiatives that promote real transformation. We're incredibly proud to be ranked number 1 in Australia and number 5 in the USA on FeedSpot's top men's mental health podcasts to listen and follow in 2024. With an average of 50,000 downloads per episode each week from listeners all around the world, our reach is significant and growing. For more information on how to become a sponsor, please reach out to Miranda Spiegner Sapon, our showrunner and executive producer at miranda@noirtainment.com. We'd love to explore how we can work together to inspire change. Now, thank you for your continued support, and let's keep inspiring change together.
You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter Swoboda. This is Inspire Change.
Before I begin the actual podcast, I would like to respectfully acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I work. I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past and present. Welcome everybody to another episode of Inspired Change with Gunter. I'm your host, and for those of you who've been around for a while, you know that what I like doing is exploring ideas that challenge conventional thinking in order to promote personal and collective growth. Most of my focus is about men, masculinity, and the deconstruction of patriarchy and why that is such an important topic. My view is that we're really not hitting the mark with regard to the issues of raising boys and girls into good and great men and women. We're addressing this in a two-dimensional way, whereas the reality is that this is a much more complex landscape. And in order to understand that, we need to challenge convention. We need to challenge what we think is true with what we know lays the foundation for the truth. So today what I want to do is I want to sort of dive into two particular concepts that are fundamental in the world of psychology today, as well as in personal development. And that's resilience and well-being. They've become buzzwords. And again, in the era of, simple catch cries and, tags and so on, they resonate loudly. Now, let me start off with saying that resilience and well-being are often used interchangeably, representing different yet interconnected facets of the human experience. Now, what I want to do today is to discuss these concepts and critique the common misinterpretations around them and explore how they can be more effectively integrated into our lives. So let me start off with resilience. At its core, what resilience is about is the ability to bounce back from adversity and to withstand and overcome challenges. People use, competitive language in that space, combative language. It's, defeat the enemy, which is some issue external to yourself, and so that you can get up again and do it again. Now, the problem with that perspective is that it's flawed. Okay, and this is why it's flawed. Resilience is generally portrayed as a personal trait or skill, something that individuals can develop, be educated in, be taught. In other words, we're going to give you a toolbox that will help you to handle life's inevitable setbacks. Now, that traditional view of resilience has serious limitations. Firstly, it emphasizes individualism, focusing on the idea of personal grit and determination. This perspective can overshadow the importance of social and environmental factors that play a crucial role in a person's capacity to be resilient. For instance, having a supportive community, access to resources, and a stable environment are just as important in fostering resilience, if not more so. Now, this is where I'm going to get down and dirty, because as this concept has generated this huge wave, one of the things that I've seen in corporations is that they've done things like downsize, reduce the number of employees, but expect the same performance results. And in order to offset the ever increasing stress, they've hired people to come in and do things like wellness courses, meditation courses, mindfulness courses, all the elements that we see as being relevant to this whole notion of resilience and well-being. And a author has just recently come out with a book, and this is what I want to draw people to, called The Resilience Myth. New Thinking on Grit, Strength and Growth. And the author is Soraya Chomali. And I think anybody within the sphere of psychology and personal development should really read this book and take the critiques to notice. And because they resonate with me, this is one of the reasons why I'm doing this podcast, is because I think it's time that we start really critically thinking about the stuff that we're being served. So there's also embedded in all of this a cultural bias in the way that we see and understand resilience. It's fundamentally rooted in the sort of general Western ideals, and it may not really align with other cultures that prioritize community, interdependence, and over individual achievement. So this could seriously lead to some misunderstandings when applying resilience in diverse cultural contexts. And, for better or worse, we have become diverse culturally. And we need to look at the strengths and weaknesses within our culture and between the cultures that make up our culture now. Now, the really serious thing in this is that resilience and its sort of understanding has in it the potential for victim blaming. When we emphasize resilience as an individual responsibility, we risk suggesting that those who struggle simply aren't trying hard enough. And this is the thing that I see within the corporate sphere and the educational sphere. And that view ignores systematic barriers and inequalities that people face, such as discrimination, poverty, or lack of access to education, deeper education. And finally, the thing that really ticks me is that resilience, again, is often just simply oversimplified. It's portrayed as a straightforward process of bouncing back, but in reality, recovery from trauma or hardship is complicated and it's not linear. It's one of the things that irritated me about the sort of Kubler-Ross model of grieving. You know, there's these stages, and then we work our way through these stages, and then we come out the other end. Now, I don't know Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. I don't know what her real view of the model that she was putting together was, and there's no way we're going to find out because she's passed away. But as it stands within the literature that I've read and the training I had in the early days in the model, it implied this very discrete categorical approach to grief. Now, having experienced grief personally, I can, with all honesty, say it's not like that. And having worked with many, many people who've been grieving and, you know, who've had to deal with multiple layers of grief because of multiple experiences, they will also attest that it's not like that. And the same applies to trauma. Trauma is not a linear process of recovery. It's multidimensional. And within it, you know, we can't have certain expectations that are implied by this performance model. So let me move on to the idea of well-being. Unlike resilience, well-being encompasses a broader range of factors, including emotional, psychological, and physical health, as well as life satisfaction and fulfillment. It in itself represents a holistic view of what it means to thrive as a human being. The challenge with it, at least one of them, is that it's completely subjective. What constitutes well-being can vary widely from person to person, influenced by individual values, goals, cultural backgrounds, experiences, education, relationships, the social connections that we have. So this subjectivity makes it difficult to define and measure well-being consistently across different populations. And I know that people talk about, Finland is the happiest country on the planet. The northern, the countries of the north like Sweden and Denmark follow closely behind. But I urge caution in that. That sense of well-being is influenced by a complex interaction of factors. So it includes personal relationships, economic stability, access to health care, community attitudes to difference, i.e., these days we talk a lot about neurodiversity, but also LGBTQ. So all of this comes together. So if we're trying to promote well-being, what we need to take into account is, like resilience, it's multifaceted, it's not linear, it's highly dynamic and highly individual. So, well-being programs and resilience programs need to take that into account. And I just don't think they do. So we need to see the individual in both of these contexts as a part of a larger social and environmental context, landscape. So again, well-being, just as resilience, is highly influenced by cultural differences. And they play a significant role in shaping how well-being is perceived. Different cultures place varying emphasis on aspects of life. It could be individual achievement or social harmony, collective achievements. I talk a lot about going from individual competitiveness or group competitiveness to cooperation, collaboration. Now, one of the things that the research is pulling out is that collaborative communities foster a high level of well-being and reinforce a better level of resilience than those who are highly hierarchical, achievement oriented, acquisitional, okay, competitive. And, again, conflict in each of these landscapes is dealt with very differently. So, unfortunately, efforts to promote well-being can sometimes lead to superficial solutions, like promoting positive thinking or certain wellness trends without addressing underlying systemic issues. If I'm going to rely on positive thinking when there are clearly environmental issues like gender inequality, like social inequity, when there are issues of conflict like harassment, bullying, coercive control, no matter how positively I can think, it's not going to increase my sense of well-being or my resilience. So we have to look at the individual and the interplay with the social context. That you can't separate the two. To do that is to do the individual a great injustice, and it's there to set them up both as a victim but also increase that learned helplessness that we often talk about in psychology. So let me just quickly run into comparing resilience and well-being in a more succinct way. So let me bring this up. Resilience focuses on how individuals cope with stress and recover from difficulties. Well-being encompasses overall life quality and fulfillment. Now, both are crucial for understanding how people navigate life challenges, but they, in my view, require different approaches. One of the things that those of you who are regular listeners have heard me say is it's not an either or proposition. It's an and also. We need to actually bring the two together and look at how they interact and how this can feed off itself to create a constructive process. Resilience is often seen as a component of well-being, contributing to an individual's capacity to thrive. I often talk about one of the things that in our culture we're starting to need to emphasize is that we need to find processes to help us to shift from surviving to thriving. And it's very evident to me as a psychotherapist and a psychologist that material wealth does not necessarily achieve this, nor does technical resources, nor does a real sense of safety and security away from aggression and violence. One critical point that I want to make is that both concepts emphasize the need to consider this interplay between the individual and the community. And again, it's that stuff that Dr. Mark Williams talks about, which is the connectedness factor. We are a connected species. If those connections are healthy, we will, by and large, do better. We'll be more resilient and we'll have a greater level of well-being. So here comes the question: how do we integrate these concepts into our lives effectively? What do you, as an individual, what do you need to do? So let me give you a couple strategies. One of the biggies is cultivate community support. One of the big factors for most of us as men, especially in our third age, is loneliness. Right? If we have good communities and good connection within the communities, then that's going to be not such a big deal. So foster supportive networks, foster communities, foster family connection. Right, if it means going to a men's shed or a men's group or having, like in German they call it a Stammtisch, go there. Even if you don't know anybody, introduce yourself. In my experience, most of these groups will, bring you into the fold, embrace you, and you become part of that community. The other part of it, and this is a process of thinking, and managing our expectations. Acknowledge that both resilience and well-being are complex and multifaceted. One solution doesn't fix it. It's a bit like if you have ADHD, simply being on medication will not sort out the problems that you have when you weren't on the medication. The medication helps, and initially for a period of time will give you really a sense of having discovered your superpower. But without learning issues about self-awareness, about flexibility, about emotional regulation, about calming yourself down and paying attention to, the problem will persist. So if you come off the medication, which a lot of people do, and you haven't done the psychological work, the behavioral work, you're just going to go backwards. So this is a really important factor. In addictions, simply giving up your drug of choice does not constitute recovery. What it's done is it's taken away, in fact, the solution that you've been using to try and solve the problems, which it doesn't. And now you're left just sitting alone again with the problems that you have without really moving into a space of processing the traumas or the various psychological and behavioral issues that got you to use in the first place. So the other thing I think that's really important in all of this is that we need to promote the systemic change. We need to look at and identify, and actually we know what creates a lack of resilience and a lack of well-being. The sort of socioeconomic pressures that we experience are a big one in that. So we need to advocate for policies and practices that promote equality, that provide us with equal access to resources, and access to mental health support. And finally, I think the important issue is that we need to respect cultural differences. When we have, like in Australia, a disparity between the general white population and the indigenous population, the First Nations that, whose land it is. And they have a very different, cultural way of looking at things. We need to learn about it, respect it, and we need to work together because we're not going to be able to dial the clock back. We need to work together to create an environment where we foster well-being so that individuals become more resilient. So I hope that stimulates your thinking about this. This is not one size fits all, and we can't use resilience as a KPI and well-being as a KPI. That sort of approach, that quantifiable approach, is insufficient. It's a qualitative thing. I think about this daily when I work with people, as a therapist, and my own, at times, conscious biases might slip in, and I need to take a step back and go, no, just call it. Just because you think you know what's going on for this person doesn't mean you do. Let me bring the person into a meaningful conversation where we explore that at a deeper level. wherein they tell me what's going on for them. Now, I can often help them put pieces together that they haven't been able to put together, and where they go, aha, that insight moment where things click. All right? Very important process. So, in conclusion, I want you to take out of this that resilience and well-being are fundamentally important concepts that have a significant impact on our lives. Now, by understanding their complexities and addressing the issues associated with each, we can create a more supportive and equitable environment for all individuals to thrive. We've got a long way to go. You know, it may be several generations before we finally hit the sweet spot. And right now, there are times when I'm a bit cynical and, look at the sort of geopolitical sphere and I go, we haven't learned shit. We still need to get our act together on the very basics. Now, as you know, my view is that hinges to a large degree on deconstructing patriarchy, getting rid of a toxic ideology that, shackles people, that, turns most of us into, little machines working in a greater machine, and we have very little autonomy and very little agency. Two elements that are actually vitally important in this issue of resilience and well-being. So, thank you for joining me. Have a really serious think about what we've raised in this podcast. I sincerely hope that this discussion's provided valuable insights into the nature of resilience and that of well-being. Play around with it. Ask yourself, what is it that I need to thrive and therefore be more resilient? So until next time, continue to inspire change in your life and the lives of those around you. This is me signing off. Love to hear from you. And if you're interested, please check out my work on www.guntersvoboda.com or www.goodmengreat.com.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit goodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.